Movies are hard, but art is awesome, and it changes kids' lives. I have been changed for the better by the art that I have consumed.
Disney's Snow White remake has spiraled into a crisis far larger than anyone initially imagined, escalating to levels of controversy and disaster that even the most pessimistic industry watchers predicted. What has now unfolded is precisely what the cynics warned would happen: a cultural and corporate catastrophe, with Hollywood executives and cast members circling like vultures, eager to pin the entire failure on Rachel Zegler. The young actress is being cast as the scapegoat, with the film's disastrous performance laid squarely on her shoulders. It is not merely suggested that she contributed to the collapse, but rather that she hammered in the final nails of the coffin, perhaps not just one, but several, securing the film's burial. From the beginning, the casting decision raised eyebrows. Many critics and audiences alike felt that Rachel Zegler was miscast in a role so iconic and symbolically tied to the name Snow White. The very title invokes a particular image, white as snow, and for some, Zegler's portrayal did not match the traditional expectation. Beyond that, her demeanor on screen and in publicity material struck many as joyless. Instead of the radiant optimism associated with Snow White, she often appeared stern, unsmiling, and detached. These impressions fueled skepticism long before the film's release, planting seeds of doubt that would later flourish into widespread criticism. But casting debates were only the surface of a much deeper turmoil. A recent Variety report revealed the explosive behind-the-scenes drama that exacerbated the film's struggles. The controversy ignited in August of the previous year, shortly after Disney's D23 Expo, when Zegler posted an Instagram video promoting Palestine. The clip, which rapidly amassed nearly 9 million views, blindsided Disney executives. For a company notoriously protective of its public image, this unapproved political statement was a shock. According to insiders, the studio reacted swiftly and severely. Mark Platt, one of the film's lead producers, reportedly flew to New York specifically to confront Zegler, pressuring her to delete the pro-Palestine material from her accounts. The situation grew even more volatile due to the film's casting of Gal Gadot, the Israeli actress who played the evil queen. Zegler's public expression of support for Palestine clashed dramatically with Gadot's national identity and political associations, creating tension between the two leads. Industry sources suggested that this dynamic strained the production and soured the press narrative, while also intensifying scrutiny of Zegler's behavior. The actress had already gained a reputation for being difficult to manage, dating back to her debut in West Side Story, a role that had brought her acclaim and even a Golden Globe, but also whispers of her strong-headedness. Variety further reported that Zegler's outspoken stance allegedly triggered death threats against Gadot, forcing Disney to increase security measures during promotional appearances. The fallout was immediate and severe. Instead of promoting the film's artistry, interviews and press junkets became shadowed by political controversy and questions of accountability. One source close to the production told the magazine that Zegler failed to grasp the magnitude of her actions, how her statements impacted not only the film's reputation but also the safety of her co-star and the stability of the promotional campaign. The cumulative effect of these controversies paints a picture of a studio in chaos, desperately searching for someone to blame. By allowing leaks and off-the-record comments to frame Zegler as reckless and politically naive, industry insiders appear to be setting her up as the singular culprit for Snow White's downfall. In reality, the disaster stems from a tangle of factors: miscasting, poor marketing, conflicting visions, and the weight of political discourse intruding on a fairytale remake. Yet the narrative taking hold is one of Rachel Zegler as the lightning rod for Disney's failure, a young actress at the center of a storm much bigger than herself, bearing the brunt of a cultural and corporate catastrophe. The controversy surrounding Rachel Zegler did not end with her pro-Palestine remarks. In fact, her political commentary extends further, complicating the situation and widening the scope of backlash. Beyond the Middle Eastern issue, Zegler had previously taken sharp stances in American politics. Following Donald Trump's election victory, she posted on Instagram voicing her devastation over the result. In her message, she wrote that she was unable to speak at the thought of enduring 4 more years of hostility, insisting that Trump supporters would never understand peace. These remarks, like her later ones, had the effect of alienating audiences across the political spectrum. Conservatives saw her anti-Trump stance as insulting, while some liberal groups were frustrated with the bluntness and lack of nuance in her commentary. What might have been overlooked for a lesser-known performer suddenly became a firestorm once attached to the face of one of Disney's most iconic properties. This dual backlash converged with another point of contention: the remake itself. Even before its release, the film was criticized for straying too far from the original narrative and abandoning the classic fairy tale formula that generations had embraced. Combined with Zegler's controversies, the project became a perfect storm of public dissatisfaction, with cultural disputes, political outrage, and creative missteps all colliding at once. The results speak for themselves. Snow White is now regarded as one of Disney's most catastrophic failures. The film holds a dismal 1.8 out of 10 user rating, a figure so low it even falls beneath the much-maligned Dragon Ball Evolution, long considered a benchmark for failed adaptations. At the box office, the numbers are no better. The film opened globally to just $82 million, a devastating outcome for a production reported to have cost between $250 million and $350 million. To provide perspective, Snow White earned $34 million less in its debut than Joker, Folia Ducks, a film already labeled a disappointment, despite costing approximately $70 million less to produce. The financial arithmetic is impossible to ignore. As one rival studio executive bluntly told Variety, "You can't call it acceptable when a live-action remake of the studio's most iconic film, one that cost $270 million to reshoot, opens at just $50 million. There's a problem with the math. That film should have made $1 billion." The statement captures the sentiment shared by many in the industry. Even with lukewarm reviews, a faithful Snow White remake ought to have been a guaranteed blockbuster. Instead, the combination of political baggage, poor marketing, audience alienation, and creative misdirection transformed it into one of Disney's most shocking commercial failures. At the height of the Gina Carano controversy, Rachel Zegler seemed eager to position herself as morally superior, distancing her own image from someone punished for reckless public remarks. Yet the irony now lies in the fact that she finds herself in a situation arguably worse than the one Carano faced. Where Carano's conflict was largely confined to one franchise, Zegler's troubles threaten the foundation of a film tied to the very origins of Disney itself. The contrast is a stark reminder of how rapidly public perception can shift. The moral high ground that feels secure today may, by tomorrow, transform into shifting sand. Despite the avalanche of criticism, however, the tide of opinion toward Zegler has begun to show signs of change. On social media, a growing number of voices have started defending her, applauding her willingness to stand by her principles despite immense pressure from some of the most powerful executives in Hollywood. One viral tweet even praised her integrity and backbone, specifically commending her for refusing to delete her post about Palestine when urged to do so by industry heavyweights. Others have expressed sympathy for her situation, noting her young age. At only 23, critics argue, Zegler may not have had the maturity or foresight to fully grasp the consequences of her statements, particularly when caught between personal conviction and the corporate machinery of $1 billion studio. To these supporters, her missteps appear less as calculated rebellion and more as the growing pains of an artist struggling to reconcile values with career survival in an industry that often punishes honesty. Some argue that Rachel Zegler is being unfairly scapegoated for a project that was doomed from the outset. According to this perspective, the film's collapse had less to do with her behavior and more to do with Disney's deeper creative issues: an over-reliance on remakes, a lack of fresh storytelling, and audience fatigue with the live-action formula. Even without controversy, they contend, Snow White would likely have faltered. Yet critics of this defense counter with an important point: at 23, Zegler is hardly a child. Occupying the lead role in one of Disney's most cherished properties came with immense responsibility, and with that, an expectation of restraint. To suggest she was too young to understand the consequences, they argue, infantilizes her agency. Ultimately, she made a conscious choice to share her political opinions, fully aware that she was representing a multi-hundred-million-dollar production. The implications of that choice may linger for years. Hollywood, for all its glamour, often operates like an elaborate high school hierarchy, risk-averse, image-driven, and quick to ostracize anyone perceived as troublesome. Actors associated with controversy are often labeled difficult or bad for business, which can make other studios reluctant to cast them. For Zegler, the danger is not just the tarnishing of one film, but the possibility of long-term career damage if producers come to view her as a liability. Disney's own reaction to the disaster underscores just how severe the fallout has become. Reports indicate that within weeks of release, promotional materials for Snow White were being quietly removed from California theaters and billboards. Such a swift pullback suggests that the studio has already written the project off as a financial loss and is eager to distance itself from the failure. It also reflects a larger trend. In an industry where perception is everything, studios may begin tightening contracts with stricter social media clauses, explicitly prohibiting political statements during promotional windows. The goal would be clear: to ensure that no future actor can jeopardize a billion-dollar franchise with a single post. The Snow White debacle may also signal the end of an era in Hollywood, an era when actors could freely broadcast political opinions while representing projects worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Increasingly, studios appear unwilling to risk the fallout of unfiltered celebrity commentary, especially when it threatens to overshadow a film's marketing campaign. Compounding the turmoil was the deterioration of the working relationship between Zegler and Gal Gadot. According to reports, tensions flared after Zegler allegedly referred to Gadot as a specialist pageant queen during an Oscars event, a remark that deeply offended her co-star. What may have started as a careless quip quickly escalated into a rift, erecting a wall of animosity between the film's two leading figures. This fracture not only complicated promotional efforts but also reinforced the narrative of a troubled production. Financially, the results are unambiguous. Snow White has joined the growing list of costly box office disappointments for Disney, failing even to cross the $200 million mark worldwide. Considering its massive production and marketing costs, the shortfall translates into a significant loss. The timing is particularly damaging, as Disney is already navigating a string of underperforming releases and facing intensifying criticism that the studio has lost touch with contemporary audiences. Perhaps the most revealing aspect of the Snow White fiasco is how quickly Hollywood can turn on its own. Talent, however promising, is expendable if it threatens the stability of a brand. Industry veterans note that the most resilient stars are often those who avoid social media entirely or, at the very least, allow professional public relations teams to carefully curate their online presence. In a business where perception is currency, discipline and silence can prove to be a more powerful survival strategy than honesty or defiance. The contrasting careers of stars like Samuel L. Jackson and Elizabeth Olsen demonstrate why longevity in Hollywood often depends on restraint. Both have remained prominent for decades in part because they keep their personal views relatively private or allow skilled publicists to manage them carefully. This strategy is not merely caution but sound business sense when one becomes the face of projects worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Divisive opinions may earn fleeting applause online, but they also risk alienating large segments of the paying audience. Social media likes do not reliably translate into box office revenue, a reality made painfully clear by Snow White's commercial collapse.
Why am I like this? Why can't I go anywhere without buying something? Also, just want to say this is what my hair looks like if I don't do anything.
The controversy has reignited debate over the increasingly political nature of modern entertainment. Many viewers, across political divides, have voiced fatigue with films and television shows that appear to function less as storytelling vehicles and more as platforms for ideological messaging. Audiences, they argue, are seeking content that unites rather than divides, and Hollywood's inability to meet this desire is driving discontent. For Rachel Zegler, this cultural climate makes her path forward particularly difficult. Some admirers praise her for standing by her principles regardless of the professional cost, casting her as a symbol of artistic integrity. Yet that kind of symbolic appreciation rarely translates into the sustained, high-profile roles that sustain a career. To Hollywood's decision-makers, she may appear less as a courageous figure and more as a cautionary example of what happens when personal conviction collides with corporate imperatives. Industry analysts predict that Rachel Zegler's career trajectory may shift dramatically in the aftermath of the Snow White fiasco. Rather than being cast as the leading face of major franchises, she may find herself relegated to supporting roles or smaller-scale productions, perhaps playing the protagonist's companion rather than the central figure. For an actress once touted as Disney's next breakout star, such a demotion would be a sobering reversal. The psychological toll of such public failure cannot be underestimated. To rise rapidly, be hailed as the next big thing, and then fall just as quickly into the role of cautionary tale can create deep anxiety, depression, and disillusionment, especially for someone thrust into the spotlight at such a young age. The collapse of expectations and the loss of industry standing often inflict wounds as damaging as financial setbacks, a reality Hollywood rarely acknowledges in its glamorous storytelling. Perhaps the most revealing element of this controversy is the way it exposes Hollywood's contradictions. The industry publicly presents itself as progressive, values-driven, and forward-thinking, yet in practice it demands something far more calculated from its stars. Studios want actors who appear authentic and morally principled to audiences, yet behind the scenes those same stars must remain commercially safe and uncontroversial. It is an almost impossible balance to maintain in today's polarized media environment, and Zegler's struggles may prove to be a symptom of a much wider dilemma. Disney's rapid retreat from Snow White could mark the beginning of a new era in how studios manage talent. The days of giving actors complete freedom of speech while anchoring billion-dollar franchises may be ending. Going forward, contracts could include stricter social media clauses, or even outright bans on political statements during promotional cycles in order to protect investments from being undermined by controversy. Yet this response raises thorny questions. Disney has already been accused of selectively enforcing such standards, treating certain political views as tolerable while punishing others. This inconsistency highlights the deeper problem. Hollywood's attempt to walk a tightrope between projecting progressive ideals and protecting commercial interests often leaves it with no clear or principled position at all. In that contradiction, the industry risks alienating both audiences and the very talent it relies on to bring its stories to life. Meanwhile, audiences who claim to support artistic freedom often reveal a selective approach. They defend free expression only when the statements align with their own views, and dismiss it when the message runs counter to their beliefs. This inconsistency reflects the broader polarization of modern culture, where even the principle of free speech becomes contingent on ideology. The clearest sign that Disney itself has deemed Snow White beyond repair comes from its marketing strategy. Reports indicate that promotional materials are already being stripped from public spaces, despite the film having only recently premiered. When a studio dismantles advertising campaigns this quickly, it signals more than disappointment. It marks a strategic retreat, an acknowledgement that the project is a loss to be buried rather than salvaged. For Disney, Snow White joins a growing list of costly blunders. Once viewed as unstoppable thanks to the combined strength of Star Wars, Marvel, and a string of live-action remakes, the studio now faces remake fatigue, dwindling audience enthusiasm, and fierce competition from new players in the entertainment market. The Snow White remake was supposed to be a safe bet, a revival of the film that built the Disney empire. Instead, its failure underscores a troubling reality for shareholders. Even the most iconic titles no longer guarantee success. The larger lesson may not lie solely in Disney's financial miscalculation, but in the shifting relationship between audiences and celebrities. In an era where stars are expected to embody authenticity yet punished for controversial honesty, the bond between performer and viewer is increasingly fragile. What once was a unifying cultural experience is now filtered through the lenses of ideology, branding, and corporate strategy, leaving Hollywood in search of a balance it has yet to find. In the age of social media, celebrities enjoy unprecedented opportunities to share their opinions directly with the public. Yet this freedom carries profound risks. The most successful performers increasingly recognize that maintaining a degree of secrecy and separation between their private lives and their public personas is crucial for career longevity. Audiences may forgive a weak performance, but they are far less likely to overlook statements that clash with their beliefs or values. Imagined, escalating to levels of controversy and disaster that even the most pessimistic industry watchers predicted. What has now unfolded is precisely what the cynics warned. Disney's Snow White remake has spiraled into a crisis far larger than anyone initially would happen. A cultural and corporate catastrophe, with Hollywood executives and cast members circling like vultures, eager to pin the entire failure on Rachel Zegler. The young actress is being cast as the scapegoat, with the film's disastrous performance laid squarely on her shoulders. It is not merely suggested that she contributed to the collapse, but rather that she hammered in the final nails of the coffin, perhaps not just one, but several, securing the film's burial. From the beginning, the casting decision raised eyebrows. Many critics and audiences alike felt that Rachel Zegler was miscast in a role so iconic and symbolically tied to the name Snow White. The very title invokes a particular image, white as snow, and for some, Zegler's portrayal did not match the traditional expectation. Beyond that, her demeanor on screen and in publicity material struck many as joyless. Instead of the radiant optimism associated with Snow White, she often appeared stern, unsmiling, and detached. These impressions fueled skepticism long before the film's release, planting seeds of doubt that would later flourish into widespread criticism. But casting debates were only the surface of a much deeper turmoil. A recent Variety report revealed the explosive behind-the-scenes drama that exacerbated the film's struggles. The controversy ignited in August of the previous year, shortly after Disney's D23 Expo, when Zegler posted an Instagram video promoting Palestine. The clip, which rapidly amassed nearly 9 million views, blindsided Disney executives. For a company notoriously protective of its public image, this unapproved political statement was a shock. According to insiders, the studio reacted swiftly and severely. Mark Platt, one of the film's lead producers, reportedly flew to New York specifically to confront Zegler, pressuring her to delete the pro-Palestine material from her accounts. The situation grew even more volatile due to the film's cast